Well, I think that's really helpful to know because, I think people are oftentimes just afraid to bring up the name or stories about the person who's gone. And so I think we need that permission. And so I thank you, for that. That's a real takeaway that we can grab from today's recording for sure.
Mm-hmm. Ginger, how did grieving affect your husband, Kevin? How did he walk through grief? And then maybe you could also mention how it affected your marriage.
Well, it was, as being the head of the house and the protector, I think it really, really affected him. He was running his own company. So in order to think and to process and do jobs, it was really a challenge to him. He grieved in a way where he kind of had a few small group of people that he would talk to about Virginia, but mostly he just went out to the country and spent some time alone with the Lord. In our marriage, it really drew us so much closer together. I've heard, I don't know, but I've seen it too, that some marriages grow apart because they grieve different. They doubt that they're grieving or they don't understand. But Kevin is real in touch with his feelings, which is unusual for a man. And we would share, almost nightly what we had felt that day, and we would examine our feelings and then talk about the Lord. And he journaled. Kevin started journaling right after Virginia was gone. I've never been a very good journaler, but he would write out what he was feeling, brutally honest, and then he would always try to end up with some scripture that was an encouragement of hope. And he has 3 or 4 books of all the journaling he went through. And so it was very helpful for us to see that we grieve differently. But it was such a bond too, because no one understood what I was feeling except for the Lord that was walking on the face of this earth, except for Kevin. He loved Virginia just as much as I did. And so we had that bond. And so how has it affected us? Even to this day, if we get in an argument, we can't stay in a conflict very long because there's just such a dependency on each other and a bond that was not there, quite honestly, before the loss of Virginia as strong.
Mm-hmm. You had shared with us a story early on about Virginia's cat dying and kind of a conversation that you had with Kevin that was helpful to you and that you share with other people. Will you share that with us now?
Sure. I think when you go through such a tragedy and a loss, you think surely God's not going to bring anything else in your life that's painful. And that's not the case. And it's not that God it's just we live in a sinful world. And since you went through this hard time, doesn't mean that you're not going to go through other conflicts and struggles. So that's what happened to us. I'd lost my father, then Virginia, and then 4 or 5 months later, I had cancer came up on my face. So I had to get this really intense surgery. They had to go back in. Her cat died. It was just one thing. The heaviness and the sadness was just, you get tired of it. You just get weary of all the tired and the heaviness. And so when her cat died, Kevin really never liked the cat, but it became real important because it was her cat. He wanted to have a little memorial service, whatever, to honor the cat, which he felt like Virginia would want. So we went outside and he had dug a hole and we had a candle, whatever. And it's like all of a sudden I just drew a line in the sand. I said, that's it. I don't think I can go another day feeling this heaviness. I said, I don't think I can do it. And he said, well, can you go another 15 minutes? I just looked at him. I said, of course I can go 15 minutes, Kevin. He said, that's all God's asking you to do. He wants to take you through the day. You have to rely on him. You have to pray. You have to ask him to give you his strength to go 15 more minutes. And as I've shared that story with other women and with other people, I thought, don't you think the Lord is quick and grateful and loves that we depend on him that much? That dependency on him has got to be an amazing thing for him to experience. Don't you know he loves that when we have to go 15 minutes, because he loves us to focus on him.
The reality is we actually do have to depend on him that much. We just don't have an awareness, right?
That's right. We don't have things in
that,
our life. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Ginger, this suffering has really brought you a ministry, and I know that you have ministered to people all over our city and I'm sure beyond. What are some things that you can tell the friends and those who surround those who are grieving the loss of a child?
Well, I would try not to fix them. Try not to give them quick responses, Bible verses, because if they're a believer, they know God's promises. They will remind themselves of them. I think their presence is the most important thing. And in my ministry, of course I went through the counseling and got the degree, but the thing that has helped me the most in my counseling is that I understand. I understand where they are. And the loss of a child is such a deep pain, and that unless you've been through this kind of loss, you really don't understand. And so that a lot of ladies, and I understood, feel like they're losing their mind. They think, I'm not right, and they have all these questions. And it's so, I feel like, comforting to them to know that it's normal. It's normal to feel what you're feeling. I would be surprised if they weren't. And so it just confirms so much to be able to understand. And that's your whole conversation counseling. If you've been through a divorce or you've been through anything in your life and you go and minister to someone that is experiencing that, there's a connection there because they understand that will speak volumes to each of these ladies. And it's just so important that we come alongside people like that and say, I understand, I'm with you through the journey. I'm not gonna desert you if you're not fun. I'm not gonna. I think that's so many people I've heard that their friends desert them because they're not the same person. They're not fun anymore. Well, they'll never be the same person. When you go through any tragedy or loss, it changes you. And so I that's one thing that's really been helpful in my counseling ministry, is that I am able to understand what they're experiencing and feeling.
And Ginger, one thing I've watched you do just so beautifully is just meet people exactly where they are and find out what's hard for them. I think that's one thing I've learned about grief through you. I remember you saying just ask them what's hard. And one woman, I wouldn't have thought of this on my own, but I asked one woman what was hard, and she said, going to the grocery store. Like, I can't go to the grocery store. And you'll just show up and go to the grocery store with them so they don't have to face that alone. And just things that we probably wouldn't think of if we hadn't walked in those shoes, and just being willing to ask the question, what's hard for you today, or what's hard for you in this season, and then being willing to show up right there.
Right, and picking up their kids. I remember, some people would go pick up my kids at school because it was painful me to, right after Virginia was gone, to go pick up, Kirby and Bowen from school and see all her friends. I mean, just things that you don't think about, that you eventually have to walk through. You eventually have to go start picking up your kids again. But initially, the pain is so heavy that they can't do it, and to ask if you can do that, and to ask what they're dealing with, it speaks volumes to them. It did to me.
Ginger, one of our guests has also lost a child and has just talked about, as time goes by, not remembering, like remembering but not remembering. It seeming like it was yesterday. It seeming like it was so far away. Can you speak a little bit to just kind of the impact over time as you have journeyed further into this grief, what it's been like for you, and maybe also what has allowed you to endure and persevere.
Well, you do. You have that fear almost of forgetting their smile, or forgetting the way they talked, or the things that they thought were funny. There's always that fear that you're going to forget, but you won't. A mother will never forget her child. And, write things down. I encourage so many women, write out the things, stories about your child. You're not going to forget them, but these will remind you of the things that they've done. And, a lot of people write books, that they, to honor their child. That, I don't know if you would ever want to go that far, if they would want to do that, but just to write out things is very helpful. And to talk about Virginia and to remember Virginia has always brought me great comfort. But through talking about her all the time, like Kevin says, I don't know how you talk about it all day long. I don't know how you talk to people all day long about it. I said, I don't know how you don't. It's just personality, and the Lord has brought me to this place. I'll have to say, 4 years from, if you had asked me 4 years ago, are you gonna, when you should go into counseling, I'd say, are you kidding? No way. I can't do that. But the Lord has brought this desire. He's given me this passion, and it's actually He's doing it. It's not me. I go to meet with these ladies and allow Him to speak through me. If it was anything of me, I probably would never be able to do it. But He gives me the words, the desire, and He's called me to it. So that's the only way I can do it. It's all of His enabling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that you give so much permission and room to grieve differently, mm-hmm. and to express differently, and to even see how God will use it in ministry differently, different mm-hmm. contexts in different ways. How do you encourage parents to deal with their children, both in the short run and the long run, in dealing with this type of grief?
To deal with their other children, or
mm-hmm. Yeah, just kind of how do you encourage parents, or even the community around, to minister to children, the siblings?
Well, I look back with my sons. They were such pivotal ages, 12 and 15, and I tried to get them to talk. I tried to get, of course, they're boys. Tried to get them to go to counseling. But I was in a fog myself. People would say, how are you doing? I don't know how I'm doing. I'm just walking. It was such a hard struggle to even make it through the day. Did I lay in bed? No, I didn't, because I had 2 other sons that I had responsibility of taking care of. But with my boys, I would have gone, if I could go back, I would provide more people, the youth pastor, their close friends, to really try to get them to talk about it more. We tried to get them to talk, but boys, and I don't really know if they knew what they were dealing with. Mm-hmm. So I would say, really do try to minister to the siblings, because they are in just as much pain as the parents, because they're the ones that are left. I know my son Kirby went to a counselor, and they said, when you're sad, or when you're upset, or when you're dealing with it, do you talk to your parents? And he said, why would I do that? They're in so much pain already. Why would I put that on them? Of course, the counselor said they need to know that. That would be encouraging, but he didn't see it that way. And I think a lot of siblings think, they're suffering so much already. I don't want to bring anything else on them. Mm-hmm. But I would highly encourage that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that idea of just giving the other children permission to talk about it and to talk to parents about it and to provide opportunities, because you can't make them. And to your point, depending on their personalities and their ages,
Right.
they may not be ready. But I will say that one of the gifts that you've given to your boys is the way that you and Kevin have modeled what real, authentic, faith-filled grief looks like.
Yeah.
And I could say that, Alex and I bear witness to God's faithfulness to your family and your response to trust Him and walk this out, a journey that is really a tribulation that most of us, really, like you said, can't understand if we have not walked through it. And that's, one of the things about this Help series that we're saying is that there are times that situations are so overwhelming to us, or if we're ministering to a friend, that we really need to ask for help. We need to align ourselves with other people, or we need to point the person that we're ministering to, or if it's in our own lives, to people who can really identify and empathize and know what it's like. Because people who suffer deeply really do become our teachers. They're the best teachers. The Word of God teaches us, and then God gives us His people to show us what it looks like. And so your example, I know for Alex and I both, has been profound. And even, I don't live in the same town anymore, but even from a distance, watching you grow, watching you start this ministry, getting updates from Alex, has just been really, really an encouragement, Ginger. And I know it doesn't take away the loss or the heartache, but I wonder if it gives some more purpose or meaning to it for you.
It does. It really, when I sit down with someone and they say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm experiencing, am I going crazy? I get that a lot. And I go, no, you're just grieving. The relief that comes over them. And then also, crying with them. If they start telling a story or start sharing what they're experiencing, there's a bond there, and I feel it. I feel their pain because I've been there. Just sometimes just to cry with them. And the tears, I think we think, I say this to all my clients, they'll go, I had a bad week. I cried a bunch. That's not a bad week. The tears can be so healing. A bad week is, I didn't cry at all. And I went through all 5 days, and I did great. Well, let's look back at what's going on. We always are trying to take different things in our life to numb that pain, because we are living in a society where we're supposed to be joyful and happy all the time, and of course we do want to have joy in the Lord, but that pain and that grief is a part of the process, and it's very important that they are walking through that grief and not getting shipwrecked by whatever they might be turned into, instead of dealing with the pain, something to numb that pain.
Yeah, and I think that idea of getting over things quickly, always being happy, can be particularly prevalent in our Christian communities, right? Until you have really felt that kind of pain, until you have felt the depth of that kind of pain. I'm just wondering how your pain has helped you to identify with the sufferings of Christ and made you realize how Christ has identified with your suffering.
Oh, wow. It's unreal. Growing up in a Christian home, I always knew, the gospel. I knew that God loved me, that He sent His Son. But especially after Virginia was gone, and she even wrote it in her testimony, imagine God giving up His only Son. 2 weeks before her accident, she had written that in her testimony. She said, I can't imagine what a parent would be experiencing, which is unreal that she wrote that. But the point is when I started realizing that God, my Father, went through this pain willingly. There was no one on the face of this earth that would willingly go through the pain that you experience. But He said, you know what, I'm going to go through it because I love you so much, Ginger. It was, the gospel was unreal to me. It was life-changing. And I'm not saying it wasn't before, but I didn't understand the suffering that Jesus, of course, went through, but that the Father went through to have to watch His Son suffer. It took on a whole new meaning. And that suffering is not so many people say, well, if God really, really loved you, he wouldn't allow you to suffer. God doesn't ever allow suffering. And I said, what are you going to say about his son? His only son he allowed to go through that suffering. And I think about the disciples at the foot of the cross. Don't you know they thought, this is awful. Well, God has made a mistake. He is so bad. Why would he allow this to happen? They had no understanding right after it happened until the resurrection when Jesus came back. So am I going to ever understand on this earth? No. Am I going to ever be like, but I do see what God has done through that suffering, and I can be hopeful that he's going to use my suffering to help others, to bring them to the gospel. And that is the hope we have.
Ginger, I've heard of biblical counseling is described sometimes as borrowing somebody else's faith or borrowing somebody else's hope. So I wonder if you could just close us and just cast a vision for the hope that a grieving parent can have as they see a lot of dark days ahead of them. But what's their real hope?
Oh, it's this is not our home. One of my clients that I'm meeting with right now, she's really struggling, lost her only son, and we're going through a book about heaven by Randy Alcorn. And every week we get together and talk about the new heavens and the new earth, and in the intermediate heaven where they are now. And I even ordered some jasper stones, from Amazon, of course. And so I give that to some of my clients. This is what this is jasper's going to be in heaven. That is our only hope. That this is not it. We're not living for this world. We're living for our home, our future home, when he will return again and make all things right. And then once that time happens, I will never be separated from Virginia again. It will be forever and ever. So our hope in Christ, I couldn't imagine going through it without that. And I do sit down with my clients and I share at first where I stand. And that is my hope. It's hope in the unseen, the things we can't see, but we know that it's true. And some are not ready for that right then, and that's fine. But that has to be our road to healing. It has to be in the hope that we have in Christ.
Ginger, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think there's such great comfort in the words that you've spoken over us, some real practical takeaways for those who are grieving and those of us who want to walk along others who are grieving as well. We're going to put in our show notes a link. Do you do Zoom counseling as well?
I do.
Okay, so we'll link your ministry in our show notes. Also, maybe you can give us a few quick resources and we can link those in the show notes as well. You mentioned the Heaven by Randy Alcorn. If there's anything else, we'll get that from you and put that in the show notes as well. But we love you. We know you. We love you. We love Virginia. We hold the memories of her so dear. We look forward to that reunion. And honestly, I'd like to be there to see you guys be reunited. That would be pretty amazing, and really sweet and special. But we know that we'll be on the other side together, and I'm so thankful for that. And so we do love Jesus for who he is and what he has secured for us. And we're thankful for that. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.